Welcome to the Regional Solicitation Overview Workshop. Presentations will be made by Council staff, TAB, and MnDOT staff. Joe Barbeau will provide background information on the solicitation and major changes. Jed Hansen will present information on the equity measures that are in each of the applications. I will present information on the application types, preparing the application, and the timeline. Colleen Brown will present the federal requirements. We will follow these presentations with questions and answers. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Joe Barbeau.
Thank you, Elaine. So I'll talk a little bit about the background and purpose of the solicitation. And so starting here, the regional solicitation distributes federal transportation money to projects that meet regional transportation needs. So in 2024, we're distributing 2028 and 2029 funds for the most part, though TDM and unique projects will be for fiscal years 26 and 27 because they need a little bit less lead time for development and construction. And the process uses a transparent and technically different scoring system to select projects. I know some of you have been a part of that. Last cycle in 2022, we had over 70 participants in the process. This is a little summary of what happened last time. It's kind of a record-breaking cycle where we had several funds kind of come out of the blue from the federal government. And so last time we funded about 60% of our applications. We usually funded about 40%, I think, 43% in 2020. And the primary reason for this is that a lot of money came from new funding sources. We were able to leverage, $383 million, and we funded projects in all 7 counties and 55 cities and townships. I would suspect that in 2024, we're going to see a little bit of return back to normal. I don't anticipate funding 94 projects, but that's a little bit up in the air. So talking a little bit about eligibility, for the most part, public agencies that are responsible for transportation infrastructure can apply. Nonprofits are eligible to apply in travel demand management. They're also eligible to apply in unique projects, though we would encourage folks to get public sponsors to participate with them for unique projects. Smaller cities could need county partnership if they're with an agency that's never applied. And so if you are, you might want to contact Elaine and myself see if there's any administrative steps you need to take to get a bigger agency participating. Note that there are some ineligible expenses listed here. Costs for studies, preliminary engineering, design, right-of-way for non-transit projects, and construction engineering are not eligible. Operating funds are also not eligible in the transit modernization category. So if you're not sure about eligible project elements, give us a call or an email. So every project undergoes a review for qualifying, and Elaine's going to talk about that in a minute, but note that the basics of qualifying is that you need to be consistent with regional plans, like the Transportation Performance Plan at the council. You need to be included within a local plan or program at your level. Some applications would be eligible in multiple categories, but note that you only can apply in one category. And if you're unsure about which category that you should apply in or which category you might be eligible for, you can always contact us so we can sort that out. Your agency needs to have an ADA transition plan. That's a requirement that's sort of been creeping in over the last several years, and we're finally where you need to have your plan completed. Projects must be accessible and open to the general public. For example, you wouldn't be able to construct a private roadway. And then a project should be permanent and a permanent improvement at the independent utility, not reliant on some other project in order for it to be successful. So this graphic shows the application categories. And so we have our 3 general modal categories: roadways, transit, travel, demand management, and bicycle pedestrian facilities. And there's 3, 4, or 5 funding categories under each of those. And then, as I said, you would look at the descriptions of those and the examples of kind of projects wanted to figure out which category your project might belong in. And if you're not certain, you can contact us. And then up at the top in the dark blue, we have our unique projects, which is being funded by a small portion of funds from actually the 2022 solicitation, so they can be closer year project funds. I mentioned that data-driven process. This started in 2014 with the prioritizing criteria that were established by TAB. That hasn't changed much. There have been small changes since then, but these are some of the criteria. Then under these criteria are 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 scoring measures that are scored within those. So these are the kind of big picture things that we're trying to accomplish with the regional solicitation. The changes in the solicitation, most years this would be more than one slide and a bigger discussion. Some of you might know this, but we are looking at a review of the whole process between now and the 2026 solicitation. So this cycle is a little bit ahead of the normal schedule. The idea was to have very few changes, really only change things that were really necessary or really sort of highly agreed upon. And so one of those changes that was not necessarily a must, but we were getting a lot of feedback about safety and having safety be a bigger emphasis in the solicitation. So the 100-point increase that we're having in most of the funding categories is done so it can be the highest valued criterion in most of those categories. We'll probably see a closer examination of just what safety means and what some of the scoring elements are there. So this 100-point increase is something that was done essentially to acknowledge higher importance of safety in this cycle. That second bullet allows bridge rehabilitation and replacement project applications on a wider range of roadway functional classifications, minor collectors and above in the urban areas or major collectors and above in rural areas. And this is in order to address the worst condition bridges in the transportation system. And then the protect element on the bottom there, that's a new funding source. And applicants should identify elements of their project that are eligible for protect funding. There's a link to the application for the eligible elements. Some of those examples are storm sewer, ponding, erosion control, landscaping, retaining walls, new bridges over floodplains, and road realignments out of floodplains. The reason for that is that protect has very specific qualifying elements, and very few projects entirely qualify for that funding. But it is an extra source of funds that we have to sort of spread the funding around more. So on that graphic a few slides ago, I had discussed that the modal categories have 3, 4, or 5 application categories. So under roadway, we do have 5. Traffic management technologies tend to be like ICS projects. Spot mobility and safety is, I think this is the 3rd cycle that we've had for this, and it's smaller, low-cost projects at intersections. Strategic capacity, we used to call that roadway expansion. So those are the big projects that add capacity, tend to be regionally significant. Roadway reconstruction and modernization has no capacity additions, and then bridges is rehabilitating or reconstructing existing bridges in questionable or poor condition. One more piece on the roadways shows each of the functional classifications, and some of you are familiar with these. And there is a rule in the solicitation that at least one project within each functional classification should be funded. I know one year we funded an A minor connector, and we had to skip a number of higher scored projects to get to that. So that rule remains. So it's something to keep in mind, that some of those projects, or at least one of those projects under each of these classifications, will be funded. So next, talk about transit and travel demand management. So that top bullet, arterial BRT, is one project that has the highest maximum funding, and that's $25 million to fund sort of a regionally significant arterial BRT project. In past cycles, up until a couple cycles ago, these were sort of being funded piecemeal, and it was very inefficient. Then we have the transit expansion and modernization categories. One provides new service, and modernization provides or makes transit more attractive by offering faster travel times, reducing operating costs, or improving customer experience. And then finally, TDM. The purpose of TDM is to reduce peak hour congestion, find incentives to minimize single occupancy vehicles and things of that nature. So with TDM, applicants, and this can be nonprofits, should have an understanding some of the procedures and policies as they relate to subrecipient agreements for federal funds. There's a couple of Code of Federal Regulations elements that you should be familiar with, and you can work with Teresa Kane from Metro Transit. They are technically the project sponsor for all the TDM projects, and she can help you out, or as could Elaine and I, if you have questions about some of the TDM procedures and requirements. And finally, bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We have 3 funding categories there. Our most popular category of all is multi-use trails and bicycle facilities. These tend to be off-road bicycle paths, bicycle and walking paths. They can also be on-street bike lanes or facilities, trails, trail bridges, or underpasses. Pedestrian facilities, which are sidewalk, streetscaping, and ADA, primarily benefit pedestrians. And then safe routes to school. Those projects need to be within 2 miles of a school and directly benefit that school. And those tend to have a lot of the elements of the pedestrian and trails categories, depending on project and depending on the needs of the area nearby a school. And finally, unique projects. So that's a $4.5 million set aside from the last solicitation, and that set aside being from a previous solicitation is so we can have sooner money for the projects that are funded. There's no rule that any projects must be funded from here, but applicants provide applications and a tab group helps score these. The set aside includes our regional travel model, travel behavior inventory. It's the survey that we put out every couple of years to sort of help inform a lot of what we do here with the solicitation, as well as other parts of what's going on at the council. There's no specific maximum award, but there is a $4.5 million availability, so it's kind of a self-created maximum. And with that, I would turn it over to Jed, who's going to talk about equity and housing engagement.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Jed Hansen. I am a transportation planner here at the Met Council, and I'm going to briefly describe the equity and housing scoring criteria in the solicitation. This criteria includes 3 measures: engagement, benefits and impacts, and affordable housing. Measure A qualitatively assesses project success through active engagement with disadvantaged communities. The measure seeks to understand how did engagement with disadvantaged communities inform or identify project need, if engagement occurred with residents of nearby affordable housing, and the methods for engaging communities, the key takeaways from that engagement, and how the project was changed with feedback. This measure also includes description of community demographics within a half mile of the proposed project and how those demographics relate to the regional context. Some of this information is provided by the regional solicitation mapping application, though this is assistive. Applicants should have a clear understanding of community characteristics prior to application. Project success is tied to active engagement, and your response should tell the story of this engagement, which should occur prior and during project development, including identification of project need. Your response should tell the story of your engagement process, including how you used a variety of methods to best meet community needs and the progression of those processes. Measure B qualitatively assesses how a project directly benefits or impacts disadvantaged communities. For the purposes of the regional solicitation, this includes Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color populations, low-income populations, persons with disabilities, youth, and older adults. Responses should focus on benefits to disadvantaged communities such as safety improvements, improved access to key destinations like school, healthcare, and jobs, and improved multimodal connections. Responses should tie these benefits specifically with identified communities and substantiate these statements with data and engagement outcomes. Applicants also have a responsibility to describe negative impacts to disadvantaged communities in this measure, including discussion of mitigation measures up to and beyond federal requirements. Unacknowledged and unmitigated negative impacts may result in a reduced score. Measure C qualitatively assesses how a project improves multimodal access for residents of affordable housing. A successful response will describe existing, under construction, or planned affordable housing developments within a half mile of the project. The mapping application will provide applicants with the number of subsidized units in the project area, though applicants may also describe other affordable housing in the project area, like planned units and naturally occurring affordable housing. This response can be supported with description of nearby important destinations like school, grocers, and healthcare facilities. Describing these elements will help an applicant describe how their project provides meaningful multimodal access improvements for affordable housing residents. The response should describe how access to the affordable units themselves are improved and how connections between those units and nearby important destinations are improved. Thank you, and Elaine will now describe the application.
Thank you, Jed. The next slides will provide information on preparing your application and the steps that occur after you submit your application. This includes the qualifying review, scoring, and project selection. When you are ready to prepare the application, there are several things to consider. Think about the types of projects that may be competitive. Be aware of the application timelines and any approvals by your council or board. Consider whether coordination is needed with other agencies. Does your agency need or require board approval before submitting the application? Do you need a letter of support from another agency, for example, that owns the right-of-way or is providing a portion of the local match? You would like to start on these processes earlier so you have the needed documentation to add to your applications. Also consider what field work is needed. Examples are crash data that's needed for roadways or surveys for the Safe Routes to School application, and what outreach opportunities to the equity populations or other outreach is needed. And this is for all applications. The final applications have been approved and have been posted online in the Word versions. You can use these Word versions to start drafting responses and then use the sample Word documents and copy and paste into the online application. And the online applications have been started, so you can begin working on those applications online too. And then consider how you will prepare the applications. Are you using all in-house staff or are you using a consultant? Will you be collaborating with other entities? Determine who will be the project manager. That is the authorized signature. So the person who submits the application is the one I'll be contacting after the application is submitted if there's any questions. And this is the person who will start the application in web grants. And it needs to be a public entity for all but the TDM applications and recommended for the unique projects also. And then others can assist on the preparation of the application and work with me on connecting if you're a consultant to get onto the as access to the public agency. Each application category has a minimum and maximum federal award that you can request. With this, there is a minimum 20% local match required to match the federal funding amount requested. After the applications are submitted, qualifying review will be the first step in the process. Prior to scoring, projects will be examined to make sure they qualify. For all the applications, there are qualifying requirements to receive the funding, and you will agree to each of these requirements as a part of your application. So we will just do a cursory review of these when we receive the applications that are submitted. If it is determined that the project is not qualified, the applicant will be notified and the applicant can appeal to the Funding and Programming Committee. Following the qualifying review, the applications are scored. Projects in each category are evaluated and scored by teams of volunteer technical professionals from various agencies. Over 70 scorers and committee chairs from across the region participated in 2022. Each scorer uses consistent methodology to score criteria for all the applications. The scoring methodology is included in the applications for each measure, so the applicant will be aware of how to respond to the measures. After scoring their measures, the scorers present the scores to their application scoring group. Each scoring group reaches a consensus on the scores and endorses a ranked list of projects by total score. These scores are sent to the applicants, and the applicants may appeal the scoring decision of an individual measure if they see an error. Following that, the technical committees create funding options for TAB using the ranked project lists. TAB will select projects based primarily on the project scores. One project from each roadway classification must be funded for the requirements of the solicitation. There are transit category limitations. Right now, it's only one BRT project is funded, or up to 7 million BRT, in addition to the ABRT. Demand within each category is considered by TAB, and in the final project selection, geographic balance and applicant distribution are also considered. TAB approved modal funding ranges that they will use to fund the selected projects. As you see on the slide showing, there is a range that totally it's over 100%, but if they selected it within the midpoint, it would be 100%, approximately 250 million they will be funding. There is also the unique project funding that's been set aside from the last solicitation. For the upcoming schedule, today is the workshop. The recording will be posted on the solicitation webpage. Then coming up, we have scheduled online training for the applications in web grants and the mapping application. We've activated the sign-on for that also on the webpage, so you can start registering for that training. Prior recordings are also posted online. The training will cover registering into web grants, filling out the application, and creating maps in the mapping application. With a live session, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. These training sessions are similar to the recordings that have been posted from previous years. So if you want to get started now or have questions, those are available for you to use now. Or if you're not able to make the training session, watch those recordings. The applications are live in web grants, so you can start working on those. The mapping application is still being tested, but we anticipate all the bugs will be worked out by this training on October 6th. We would recommend that you get into web grants by December 1st. That gives you a couple weeks to fill out the applications. The sooner the better, so if you have any questions, you can ask. We do recommend not waiting to deadline. If you have previously registered into web grants and can't remember your user ID, send me an email and I will look it up for you. You will then use this user ID to request your password from web grants, and you'll get an email from web grants giving you your password. Applications are due December 15th, 4 p.m. The time is set up to automatically close in web grants, so we recommend not waiting till 4 p.m. or before in case you have computer issues, because it is an automatic setup. And then after the scoring, it is anticipated that TAB will approve the recommendations for funding the projects in July of 2024. And also, when you're looking at applying for your projects, when looking at transit or TDM, be aware of the projects you probably will to apply for. For transit projects that include a bus purchase with the service to start in 2030, the application should select either 2028 or 2029 as their program year to allow time for the bus to be delivered before the project starts. And again, funds are not available until October of 2028 for projects that are selected receive 2028 funds. The contacts for both transit or MTS are Heather Giesel and then Teresa Kane for the TDM questions. In addition to the 12 regional solicitation applications, the Highway Safety Improvement Program was approved, and that will be out at the same time as the regional solicitation. MnDOT has indicated that the application will be released on their website next week. The applications are due February 1st, 2024, so there's a later deadline than the regional solicitation to give you some time if you're working on both types of applications. There's a $2 million maximum award for projects in the 2028 and 2029. The difference with HSIP, the federal share funds 90% of the total project, so 10% local match. There is $30 million available. And the timeline is TAB will approve the project for funding in July 2024, the same time as they select the projects for the regional solicitation. And if you have any questions on the HSIP program, Lars Impola is the contact. I will now turn the presentation over to Colleen Brown, MnDOT State Aid, who will provide information on the federal requirements.
Thank you, Elaine. Hello, my name is Colleen Brown. I'm the Federal Aid Program Coordinator in the MnDOT Office of Metro State Aid. My presentation will focus on federally funded construction projects that are administered by the Metro State Aid Office. I will highlight some important information to consider when you are applying for federal funds, and if you are awarded funds, important criteria and policies that must be followed so that your project delivery is successful and federal funds are secured. The Federal Aid Funding Program is a reimbursable program. The federal funds awarded are not an upfront grant. Project sponsors must follow a documented process, incur the costs, and make payment to the contractor before the federal dollars are reimbursed. When federal funds are awarded to an agency, the agency's sponsor will go through many steps to achieve project authorization. Projects will follow the state aid delegated contract process, or what we call DCP. Selected projects will be placed in an approved state transportation improvement program, or STIP. The environmental process cannot begin until this step is completed. When you are ready to begin your project, typically 1 to 2 years prior to bid opening, you will contact the Metro State Aid Office to schedule a project kickoff meeting. This meeting is crucial to getting the necessary information to aid in the delivery of your project. When all the steps outlined are completed, authorization of the funds, advertisement, and bid opening can occur. Upon completion of construction, state aid construction personnel will perform a final inspection to ensure that the project was constructed as proposed. Many organizations can apply for federal funds. However, only certain agencies can enter into an agreement with MnDOT to spend the federal funds. The 7 metro area counties and state aid cities can enter into an agency agreement with MnDOT. All other applicants must contact the Metro State Aid Office prior to submitting their application to determine if a sponsor is required. Applicants must have approval of the sponsoring agency prior to moving forward with the project. Agencies that are not a state aid city or county may be approved to sponsor their own project if they have had a history of delivering a federal project successfully and have adequate staffing, or are hiring a consultant that is familiar with the state aid process. The risk assessment form in the application must be filled out in its entirety. Risk items such as right-of-way, railroad, and historic properties may add extra project timeline and should be considered when selecting your desired program year. Points are awarded based on how many steps a local agency has already taken toward the implementation of the project. For example, if you have a railroad crossing on a project, more points are awarded if you have made contact with the railroad prior to applying for funding than if you have not. High-risk projects increase the likelihood that projects will withdraw at a later date. If this happens, the region is forced to reallocate the federal funds in a short amount of time or return them to the US DOT. The project information form has been reformatted to provide all information we need to put your awarded project into the TIP. Do not request an SP number for your project through the normal state aid process. An SP number will be assigned after project selection and will be included on your award letter. Keep in mind that the termini you choose must be within 0.3 of a mile of all work in your construction project. Include the road system, route number, and the roadway name for the main route and termini points. If you have more than one route on your project, provide the information for the roadway with the majority of the work. Include all cities or townships within the project limits. Check all primary work types that apply to your project and do not include incidental items such as storm sewer, water main, curb and gutter, and drainage. Federal eligible work for roadways is generally work that is necessary to complete the funded project. Typical roadway project elements include but are not limited to grading, surfacing and storm sewer, retaining walls and noise walls, signals, signing and striping, and lighting for roadway or pedestrians. Utility replacement is an eligible expense if the work is due to the project construction. Upgrades or replacement due to convenience are not eligible. Landscaping is eligible for tree replacement at a rate of 2:1 and shrubbery for erosion control, but not beautification. The primary role of multi-use trails and bicycle facilities is to provide an alternative mode of travel for purposeful trips. Eligible items include grading and surfacing, retaining walls, drainage, bike racks, shelters, benches, and wayfinding signs. Eligible landscaping items are limited to turf establishment, 2:1 tree replacement, and shrubbery for erosion control. While landscaping is an eligible expense for these facilities, excessive landscaping such as fountains, elaborate signing, irrigation, and perennial gardens are not. Inclusion of items in the funding application does not mean federal funds can be used to fund them. The items that are not federal eligible include preliminary design and construction engineering, right-of-way acquisition, surplus materials, work outside of the limits defined by the environmental document, utility work that is not a direct result of the project, and excessively expensive treatments such as large welcome to the city signs and public art. Use the estimate of tab eligible project cost form to obtain your project total costs. Federal funds cannot exceed 80% of this total or 90% for HSIP and will be capped at the level requested in the application. If accurate estimates are not prepared, a STIP amendment could be required, which can add a significant amount of time to your project and may jeopardize desired letting dates. Large increases or decreases in cost during project development are scrutinized by our office to ensure that the project scope has not changed. Projects selected are given a program year. If the agency wishes to authorize a project in a year earlier than that program year, this can be accomplished through the development of an advanced construction agreement or AC. The project must be in an approved STIP as an AC project. The agency funds the entire project in the year the project is authorized, and the federal funds are reimbursed in the year that they are programmed in the STIP. If other projects in the program drop or receive a program year extension, AC projects receive priority for early payoff of their federal funding. There are two policies that directly pertain to the delivery of your TAB-funded projects, the program year policy and scope change policy. The program year policy is intended to manage the timely delivery of projects and limit project movement in the STIP. Movement of projects in the STIP creates complicated funding problems, as the STIP needs to remain fiscally balanced in each fiscal year. The program year is not the same as a calendar year. The program year follows the state fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. For example, a program year for fiscal 26 would be from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. Projects not receiving federal authorization by June 30th of the program year will not be carried over into the next year without an approved extension. The program year policy is currently under review for updating. However, the information related to fiscal year deadlines will likely remain the same. Use the program year criteria and dates to help select your appropriate program year. The following dates and deliverables have been outlined to ensure that all projects can receive authorization approval by June 30th. By April 1st of the program year, project sponsors should have an approved environmental document or very close to approval, right-of-way certificate approved, or if in condemnation, it must be initiated by February 28th with title and possession by June 1st. Final plans submitted and reviewed for standards and eligibility and structural design. If this criteria is not met, an extension has not been approved, federal funds may be forfeited. Select your program year carefully. If it appears that you cannot meet the deadline for authorization within its program year, a program year extension may be requested. Program year extensions are for projects that run into unusual circumstances while developing their project. The project sponsor must demonstrate that they have made significant progress with their project and have unique circumstances that delay the delivery of their project. The request must be made by December 31st of the project's program year. All extensions require TAB approval. There are financial implications if the extension is granted. The agency must deliver their project in the following program year. However, federal funding may not be available until a later year in the STIP. The agency needs to AC the project until those federal funds become available. Maximum length of extension is 1 year, and only one extension may be granted per project. Any exceptions to this policy must be approved by TAB. This graphic explains more clearly the financial implications of receiving a program year extension. If you have a project programmed in fiscal year 26 and you decide you need an extension due to some difficulties with, say, the railroad, your fiscal 26 project moves 1 year and granted an extension to fiscal year 27. The project must be authorized in fiscal year 27. However, the agency will need to finance the project as the federal funding will likely not become available until fiscal year 29 or 30. These are the funding years that are outside of the current STIP. The second policy to consider when submitting your application is the scope change policy. This policy is also currently under review for possible updates. Any revision that changes the physical characteristics of the project and has a potential to detract from the project's benefits to the region will likely trigger some level of scope change. Currently, there are 3 levels of scope changes: administrative, informal, and formal. Administrative scope changes are minor in nature and are approved by the Federal Aid Program Coordinator in the Metro State Aid Office. Informal scope changes exceed the standards of administrative and are brought for consultation between Met Council and the Federal Aid Program Coordinator. The consultation will determine if the change can be done through informal process or if the changes result in a negative impact that require approval by committees. Formal scope changes are required when the project change significantly alters the estimated benefits to the region. These requests must go through formal committee process and be approved by TAB. The formal scope change process can add approximately 3 months to a project timeline. Approval of scope changes are not automatic and may result in the reduction of federal funds. Define your project carefully. When developing your project application, keep in mind that scope and project costs are important as projects are scored and selected based on the benefits they provide. Description in the funding application and STIP serve as your project scope. There are 3 major elements that you should consider when writing your funding applications: project termini, project elements and key connections, and total project costs. The following slides will go through these elements in a little greater detail. Project termini. Select your project termini carefully and ensure that the project has logical termini. Logical termini means that the project can function properly without requiring additional improvements elsewhere. It typically begins and ends at a point that makes a connection to a major facility or roadway. Extending or reducing project limits or adding locally funded work during project development will require a scope change and possibly a TIP amendment. A reduction in project length may result in the reduction of federal funding. This will be determined through the formal scope change process and will require TAB approval. Project elements and key connections. Adding or removing elements identified in your application, such as removing a piece of trail, reducing number of lanes, or changing the intersection treatment, as well as removing connections to parks, schools, and historic sites, will be scrutinized and require a scope change. The scope change process will determine if key elements can be removed or added to a project and if funding levels will remain the same. Project costs increase throughout project development. So it is important when you are preparing your application that you prepare a realistic and accurate estimate. The total cost you provide on the funding application plus inflation will be entered into the TIP. Increases or decreases in the total cost during project development that exceed FHWA guidelines will require a STIP modification or formal amendment, which can add significant time to your project delivery. Large increases or decreases in cost are also scrutinized to ensure that project scope has not changed.
With that, I will end the workshop. Feel free to, if you have questions later, to send them on to me, and I will forward them on to our technical experts if they're technical related, or if it's an overview related, I can answer those. Thank you.